Fantastic. Welcome to the podcast here. Let me give you a proper introduction, all right?
Sounds good.
Steve Linton is the president of Deltec Homes and the chief steward of its greater cause and purpose. Deltek, certified B Corporation that connects people with our planet by design. And Deltek specializes in building energy efficient, durable, and beautiful panoramic homes using components produced at its Asheville, North Carolina headquarters. How did that sound? Did that sound like you?
Thank you.
Great. Well, I'm glad to have you here. And of course, the truth is I just moved out to the Virgin Islands here, and it's a hurricane-prone part of the world. And in fact, we've had several recent in recent years. It is hurricane season now, and I'm talking to you in a house that was leveled by a hurricane and rebuilt from the walls that were left. So it's quite relevant, and you can see the scars of it all over this town called Christiansted, where I live. So we can see what you do, and that's why I, of course, was very interested in the topic, and I wanted to speak to somebody who was knowledgeable about building resilience against such Mother Nature's vicious anger, basically.
Yes. No, I really appreciate you connecting with us, and we're happy to talk about what we do and talk about how we, ultimately change the way the world builds, which is kind of what we're setting out to do.
Hopefully. Yeah. Well, as a company, Deltek's been around for several decades, 50 years, something like that?
That's right. Yeah, we began over 50 years ago in 1968. And like I just mentioned, our greater cause and purpose is to change the way the world builds, and we do it one home at a time. And we sort of think of it as, building the home the right way the first time, and intentionally designing a home that can stand strong to hurricanes like no other. And, something that we're continually innovating and trying to make better because we've seen in recent years, Mother Nature seems to be upping her game. So we are trying to continue to innovate to withstand stronger and stronger storms.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that somebody out there is working on that angle. I mean, I've been getting into, and we talked a little bit before by email about building codes and how that's part of the issue, but designing more intelligently from the ground up is kind of what you guys do, right?
It is, yeah. We're a design company at heart, but we also are a construction company in our body, if you will. So we're looking at the codes, but we're really seeing the codes as the starting point. We're always wanting to be well beyond that. And the way that we build is somewhat unique in that it's kind of a hybrid of a sort of prefabricated home and a site-built home. So we're building the structure of the home ahead of time in our facility here in North Carolina. We ship those structures all over the globe. We've built in over 30 countries. And then those structures are built in the local area, and the inside is finished by a builder in that area. It allows us to really control the process and make sure that structure is both designed and built to meet those rigorous standards that we set above code.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting business construction model, basically. Did you guys create that, or is that something that other types of construction companies do, where it's like your hybrid of custom and prefabricated kind of?
It's, I would say we're not the only ones who build that way, but I think more and more companies are looking to incorporate some aspect of prefabrication into how they build. And I think Deltek's one of the oldest companies around that is doing that. So in some sense, you could say we pioneered the idea, but the concept of offsite construction or prefabricated construction has been around for over
Yeah.
100 years, and it continues to evolve. And yeah, we're trying to set it up so we can give people kind of the best of both worlds, because there's some great flexibility that comes from being able to adapt the home to the site conditions and not be constrained by only one particular design. And so we're able to give people that flexibility while at the same time the high level of control, quality control tolerances and those types of things.
I can't imagine Deltek was doing that back in '68, though, for example.
Well, yeah, it's been a journey, right? And the company really started to serve the resort industry back in the late 60s. We were building structures for people taking vacations on the beach and at ski slopes in the mountains, and they would stay for a week and they would stay in our homes. And we haven't talked about, what's really unique about a Deltek is the shape. So it's a panoramic home. And so when you're inside that home, the windows are wrapping around you and you get this complete panoramic experience. And when people stayed in those homes back in the late 60s on vacation, they had this totally unique experience. And they said that, that I would not have expected that, but that was really cool. I want to live in a home like that. And so over the last several decades, we've transitioned from, we still do resorts from time to time, but the vast majority of our homes are now individual, custom designed homes for someone building in, the Virgin Islands or wherever in the world.
Do you have the ability, while I'm talking to you, to share your screen or something? Just so anybody who's watching this could could take a peek at one or two of the common design elements that you use.
Oh, certainly, yeah.
I mean, I'll keep talking to you in the meantime for other reasons. Now you went to Cornell and you got a degree in civil engineering, and I see that you have a master's in business from Western Carolina.
All correct. Yes.
Yes. So you probably are using both of those at the helm of this particular company. How long have you been with Deltek?
Yeah, so I started with Deltek in 2007, and I actually came on originally as our green building consultant, essentially. So I had a background in structural engineering from college and from previous work experience, but I always had a passion for sustainability, and so I came to Deltek to fill that role because that's what we really focus on as well. And so it's really been a great combination of my interest in engineering, my passion for sustainability, and then also, learning sort of the business side of how we craft and maintain and advance sustainable business. And so, something we've done since I have been president is to become certified as a B Corporation, which is really sort of allows us to show third-party credentials that we're, running a business that's both good for people and the planet, as well as the communities that we do business in.
Can you explain for anyone who doesn't know what a B Corporation, what designates a B Corporation?
Yeah, so it's a certification by a third-party nonprofit that basically looks at how a company is addressing social and environmental priorities. So, the typical company wants to make a financial profit, and Deltek is in that boat as well. That's how you that's the first box you have to check to stay in business.
Yeah.
But we're also looking to bring about social profit, so to speak, and environmental profit. So how are we making the world a better place? How are we impacting our communities? And so, it looks at everything from the benefits that we offer to our workers to, the volunteerism that we have in our communities, and all across the board, how we govern the business to make sure that it is preserved into the future to accomplish these goals.
Okay, that's cool. You have a design ready yet? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to do two things at once here.
It's my fault. I challenged you to do two things at once.
I like to be challenged. Let me. Oh, it says host disabled attendee screen sharing.
Okay, let me fix that then for you. Share. Um, that's got to be my fault. All right. Um, I've never tried to do this in the middle of
Well, and perhaps the simpler solution is, for folks that are listening live,
here we go.
the place to go is to our website, deltekhomes.com. And there's plenty of galleries and photos there just to get a sense of what a panoramic home looks like.
All right. So it looks like I might have allowed you now, potentially. Check.
Oh, it looks like it's working. Yep.
Okay.
So this was just the first home that popped up on one of our galleries, but this is a Deltek home on a lake. And you can sort of see the round shape in the background. There are some features that break up that shape in this particular design. They go through smallest home to, we've built them over 10,000 square feet. And they're all just a combination of different building blocks. So this one's 2 stories, probably, I would guess 1,200 square feet per level, maybe 1,500 square feet per level. We also do some other modern designs that you saw there. Here's another home in Florida that was built to be hurricane resistant. So in a sense, this is kind of a good example of, from the outside anyway, what that panorama would be.
Yeah.
And then from the inside, it's even more remarkable.
I'm sure. Just imagine the views that you have from inside that building. How many homes does your company typically build in a year, say?
So it's we typically sell around 100 homes each year, and like I said, we're shipping them, all over the world. Probably half of our business is in the Southeast U.S., since that's closest to where we are. But we, have recently shipped homes to Africa and Asia, and the Caribbean is a very common destination for us, just because there are a lot of hurricanes in that area, and that's something that we specialize in.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty great. I saw some images from I think it was Tom who was speaking with me before, and he had showed an area where the only thing that wasn't destroyed or wrecked was one of your homes. Basically, everything else was just completely smashed, and your home was almost undamaged from 150 mile an hour winds. Can you talk a little bit about the hurricane wind dynamics, I guess, and how, where the damage comes from in a hurricane, and why specifically your homes, why the design of your homes protects them?
Yeah, definitely. So the typical hurricane is, attacking a home in a few different ways. And, the most obvious one that people tend to see on the news is when a home loses its roof, right? And that's high winds hitting that roof and basically pulling it off of the building. And, beyond that, obviously, as the wind speeds get higher and higher into category 3, 4, 5, you start to see complete obliteration of structures, which, could be happening when the roof pulls off, or, another common weak point is the connection from the home to the foundation. And, then to complicate matters, you also have different environmental conditions that are happening from water and from storm surge. So depending on where the home's situated, the wave action from the ocean, or the flooding or undermining of the foundation from water, if it's right on, the sand on the beach, there's all sorts of mechanisms of failure. And so, essentially the way that we approach designing and building a home, the typical home that's built in a hurricane area is a home design from anywhere, and they'll just add sort of additional hardware, additional bolts or fasteners or connectors to hold everything together. And I'm not saying there's anything necessarily wrong with that approach, but it's somewhat like trying to build a race car out of a school bus. They're just 2 totally different platforms, right? And so the way that we look at it is, how do we design a home from the ground up that will resist a hurricane? And so that's essentially the Deltek way. And there's 3 things that contribute to that. The first is the shape. We've talked most about the shape already, but it seems intuitive that a round shape would be stronger because it's more aerodynamic, right? The wind flows around the home. But the real secret there is that the pressure that's actually pushing on the home is about 30% for wind blowing on a rectangular shaped home. And that's just from the aerodynamics. And so right off the bat, you sort of have this bonus where, the same 150-mile-an-hour wind hitting a round home, a Deltek home versus a rectangle is going to put a different amount of pressure on each home. So we're able to reduce the force on the home. So that's the first piece, the shape. And then the second piece is really the materials that go into our homes. And, the materials that we're putting in pretty much across the board are about twice as strong as what you'd find in a typical home. So, for example, the plywood that we use to encase the home is twice as strong as conventional oriented strand board or OSB. The structural lumber that we put in the home is about twice as strong. It's a very special grade of lumber. Each board is tested to ensure that it meets the strength criteria that we have set forth. So we got shape, we've got materials. The third piece really is what we call precision engineering. And I'm going to try to share my screen again here in case we have some other folks listening live. But if you're not listening live, you can go to Deltek's website and look at the hurricane section.
Yeah.
And there is a graphic here that sort of shows what I'm talking about with precision engineering.
I found it to be a really great graphic. It's a really
good. Thank you. So again, for those who are listening and maybe don't have this in front of them, imagine a bike wheel or sort of a spoked wheel. Very lightweight structure, but extremely strong. And our home is essentially created the same way. So there are these radial trusses that go from the center to exterior wall, and it creates an exceptionally strong structure that's built just totally different than any other home is. And the real advantage here is no matter what direction the wind comes from, and oftentimes in a hurricane, you'll see winds coming from different directions. A Deltek home is able to take that force and distribute it throughout the entire home so that the entire home is working together as a system. And so that's really kind of that third piece, that precision engineering. It's all working together. It's built from the ground up. And that's really one of the most unique things about what it is that we do that allows these homes to, have the amazing track record that they do.
Yeah. Well, I'm convinced. I'm convinced. Let me see. Yeah. So can you talk back about codes again? So you've asserted that the homes you make more than meet the codes in any region or area, and I've been referred to multiple times to the South Florida building codes that have been made as some of the strictest that we're aware of. I don't know if there are. I don't know if there are other codes from other parts of the world, but they probably refer to the same types of measures, I assume.
Yep.
What are some of the most common elements that the ones that make the biggest difference, I suppose, that are incorporated into codes like those?
Yeah, I think the South Florida, really the Florida Building Code for the entire state is probably the gold standard. And one of the things that we saw over the last couple of decades as these codes started to come into effect is the impact that they're having. Homes built of previous generations, whether it's 1900s or 1950s or 1970s, that did not have those codes are going to continue to be, unfortunately, they're going to continue to be damaged by hurricanes. But the Florida Code, for example, started to really look at the proper connections that are required from, like I mentioned, the roof to the wall. It's a critical one. That's what people call a hurricane tie, if you've heard that term. And
Okay.
those can be retrofitted. If a listener's out there and they have an existing home, definitely something to check out. If you don't have hurricane ties, they can be added in. That would be a smart thing to do. but also the connections between the home and the foundation. And so that, I would say, was one of the kind of big innovations with, the evolving building codes. But they've also been sort of changing the wind speeds that we're designing for. As we learn more about storms and the history of storms and what we expect in the future, you're starting to see an increase in those design wind speeds. And so, for example, right now, Deltek, our current design standard at its highest would be for a 200 mile an hour wind speed. But we're also actively working on a 225 mile an hour.
Because who knows where we're going, right?
Exactly. And so, we try to stay ahead of the codes. For a long time, it was easy, but as the codes continue to advance, we also continue to kind of push that envelope and look at essentially increasing those wind speeds. The couple of resources I would just throw out there again for folks who are interested to learn more beyond code would be, there's a program called Fortified Homes. Okay. And it's a US based program, but it's run by the Insurance Institute. I forget the exact name, but they essentially have a checklist, and a third party engineer has to come and inspect the home to verify that all these additional above code things are done. Okay. And essentially a Deltek home, kind of off the shelf, designed for a hurricane area, is meeting all of those additional requirements. Mm-hmm. And then FEMA also has a really good guide that they put together. I think it's called Home Builder's Guide to Coastal Construction, something along those lines. And so there's lots of commentary and details about, what can you do above and beyond. For example, Deltek, when we put a hurricane tie from the roof to the wall, it's basically a double hurricane tie. So instead of just one piece of metal, it's two. Yeah. And so there's sort of some simple things like that could be innovated for a large majority of homes. And then there's the more complex things that we talked about, like the wheel geometry that actually really strengthens the home from the ground up.
What do you think about, have you considered a branch or a division within your company that primarily works with retrofitting pre-built structures, or at least modifying them to increase their durability?
We've talked about it a little bit. We haven't seriously pursued that, but I think there's certainly a market out there. But coastal areas, the challenge for us is, being based in North Carolina, and serving the entire world. It's hard to figure out how to serve everyone. And so, maybe someday we'll be able to offer that additional dimension to our services.
I wonder if it could be effective. Say somebody called you up and they were in Oregon or whatever, and they wanted to have you look at their structure. If you would send them a drone, and then the drone flies around and scans their existing structure and develops a model, 3D model of it.
Yeah, I mean, technology has some, I think there's some amazing things on the horizon there. Yeah, if there were a way to scan it almost like an X-ray, then you'd really be able to dial into how to diagnose and how to treat that.
It is becoming more possible. I used to live in Micronesia, and they were doing this with some UNESCO World Sites where they were scanning ancient structures in a similar way so they could build a model, and then people could understand the architecture that they used to use as well.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's opening a new world. Here's the last question for you. The cost of your services, where does that rate versus your traditional custom built home? Are you ballpark similar, or are you a step above?
So in some ways it depends on the area that the home is being built, because the cost of our structure is the same whether you're building in the Virgin Islands or if you're building in North Carolina. And obviously the cost to build is different in different parts of the world. Mm-hmm. I think when you look at it from a sustainability standpoint, which is where we try to have the conversation with people, building in Deltek is an incredibly smart investment, because having to rebuild a home is obviously the worst case scenario from a cost standpoint. Then there's no competition, right? If you don't have to rebuild it, that's a win. At the same time, there is a premium to build a home like this up front that's going to stand strong. But when you look even at when you look at the total cost of ownership of a Deltek home, even if you're not hit by a Category 5 hurricane, you know, you look at the utility savings because of the sustainability that's built into the home,
Right.
and you look at the maintenance savings from the higher end materials that we're using. What we show to people is that, you know, over time, that total cost is actually less. So that's why it is a smart investment.
That's
Now, up front, yeah, are you going to spend 10% or 15% more? Probably, but over time, you're going to get that back. And especially if you're in a sensitive coastal environment, to
yeah.
me, it's kind of a no-brainer.
Is there a reduction in homeowners insurance that gets passed on to your clients?
It's something that we continue to work on. It is available in certain states for people that do the fortified home program that I mentioned, because that is actually part of the Insurance Institute in America. But it's something that, you know, we would love to be able to offer on a broader scale. And, you know, getting the recognition of the insurance companies is not necessarily an easy thing to do, but it's something that we're starting to look at again and trying to dig into that more deeply.
Okay. Well, I really want to thank you for being on my podcast and my program here, and also tell people again where they can get more information about either the science that you're talking about here, and also, of course, how they can find your company.
Yeah, definitely. I think the best place to start would be at our website, which is deltec.com, and Deltek is DELTECHOMES. So deltechhomes.com. It's a great place to start. If you're looking to learn more about the engineering side of hurricane resistant homes, again, the Fortified Home Program is a great program, as well as FEMA's Coastal Guide to Construction have some really interesting resources as well.
Cool. And I got to say, from my little research I did, some of the graphics that were on the Deltek website were as enlightening as anywhere. So very, very well done. And I'm so glad. I hope that people reach out to you and that they pay attention to this and they're considering building a new construction or trying to fortify and improve the structure they do have that's existing. Thanks so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day, Steve.
Thanks, Brennan. You too. Great to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.